My niece wanted to start photography, so the first question she asked was, "Hey uncle, I want to start photography. What camera should I buy?" "I don't know. What is your budget and what do you want to shoot?" "I don't know. I want to shoot kind of everything and I have 1500. "This is not my niece. I don't know who she is. Help me." I am Pitch and today I will explain to my niece with very simple words the differences between my three cameras. The Sony A6700 that I use since 8 months mainly for macro videography but also for general photography. The best APS-C from Canon, the Canon R7 that I use since 2 years for wildlife videography and photography, but also for general purpose. And the closest equivalent from Fujifilm, the X-T5. The closest equivalent price-wise would be the XS20 that I also owned for 2 weeks until the LCD screen stopped to work. So I bought this one instead. And I use it mainly for macro photography, but also for landscape, portrait and street sometimes. I will keep it simple. I will cover what matters the most for a beginner like my niece. I will keep her name secret, so let's call her Lala. And if I say something wrong, please let her know in the comment below. We will talk design, handling, specs, lenses and stuff. So here they are from the top, and you can see already that they have a very different design. The Canon has the most rounded shapes, it has a lot of curves, and it has the bigger grip. The Canon just looks a bit bigger overall. The Sony has more of an S shape, it is more streamlined, more simple, it is the smallest and the most compact. Nothing sticks out except the lens mount, the grip, and the electronic viewfinder, which is the smallest EVF of them all. The Fujifilm has the smallest grip. It is the slimmest because of the small grip and because the EVF doesn't stick out that much as the Canon does. The A6700 and the R7 have a mode dial and a multifunction hot shoe. So you can plug a microphone that will record without any additional cable, for example. The Fuji doesn't have a mode dial and the hot shoe is not multifunction and will only accept a self-powered flash. Here from the front, the R7 with its rounded curves has a largest lens mount. The A6700, streamlined, rectangular, simple. And the X-T5, a more retro style. You can see already a lot more buttons, wheels and switches than the two other cameras. Now from the back it's kind of the same layout. The D-pad and a lot of buttons are more or less in the same place on each camera. The menus are placed differently. The play and delete button on the Fujifilm are on the top left instead of the bottom right. The EVF are very much aligned with the lens on the Canon and the Fujifilm, but it is placed on the extreme left on the Sony. There is a joystick on the Canon and the Fujifilm, but it's missing on the Sony. Another important difference is that you can use the D-pad on the Sony as a wheel. So the Sony has actually 3 wheels, one for the aperture, one for the shutter speed, and one for the ISO. The Canon R7, believe it or not, has only 2 wheels, shutter speed and aperture. You have to push the ISO button to change the ISO with the shutter speed wheel. Now most of the Canon lenses have actually a control ring that you can use to control the ISO, so that could be your third wheel. On the X-T5 you have 5 wheels and 2 of them are clickable and give you even more options. I will not go into too much details, but if you like the retro style with many buttons, switches and wheels, this is the one. Keep in mind that the most button on each of those cameras can be customized and assigned to another function of your choice. On the sides now, the easiest door to open belongs to the Canon. Inside there are 2 slots for 2 SD cards. On the other side you have 4 doors made in a softer plastic. You will find there one micro HDMI and one USB-C port a 3.5mm jack for your microphone, another 3.5mm jack for a headset, and a remote control jack. The Fuji has 3 solid doors in plastic. Here you have 2 slots for SD cards. On the other side, one 3.5mm mic jack, one jack for a remote control, and here one USB-C and one micro HDMI port. For the Sony, everything is on one side. One 3.5mm mic jack, one USB-C port, and only one slot for a SD card. The handling. The most comfortable by far is the Canon R7, not only because it has the biggest grip, but also it has more rounded shapes as well, and it is also coated with a nice and stickier rubberized layer compared to the 2 other cameras. The Sony has also a decent grip, and because it is the lightest, that makes it also very enjoyable to handle, but your little finger may feel a bit useless with the Sony. The Fujifilm is the heaviest with the smallest grip, but it's still okay, of course, especially if you shoot with 2 hands like most people do. It is just a bit more painful if you do macro photography, for example, with the extra weight of the flash and the flash diffuser, especially if you try to handle the leaf with your other hand. That said, you have options, like that small rig adapter, for example. Last word about the bodies. They are all weather sealed in some level, so they are able to resist a light rain and some dust. But I'm talking to my niece. If you want to photograph in the rain, you take an umbrella and you cover the camera with plastic. Image quality. All the same, all very good, no problem at all, just trust me. I did macro with all 3 cameras, took street photos, landscape, wildlife, everything with those cameras. You can crop a lot with all of them without any problem. As a matter of fact, any recent camera you use will give you a good result as long as the lens you use is good. I can't show you a comparison because I would need the exact same lens attached to all 3 cameras. If you want to compare the quality at higher ISO, it's also all the same really. If you absolutely need a camera with less noise, you just go buy a 24 megapixel full frame. That said, now let's talk about resolution. Knowing that 1 pixel will capture 1 color at a certain level of brightness, the Fujifilm sensor is covered with 40,200,000 pixels, or to simplify, 40 megapixel. This is the biggest resolution that you get on a cropped sensor in 2025. It means you can crop a lot into the image without losing details, and that's why I'm using the X-T5 for macro. It also means that you can make a very big print. The Canon R7 has 32.5 megapixel. That's also a lot, and that's one of the reasons I use it for wildlife. Other reasons are good autofocus, 15 frames per second in burst mode, comfort, and nice Canon telephoto lenses. The Sony has 26 megapixel, and it's still plenty as well. I am just blown away by how much I can crop with this camera, as long as a sharp lens is used and as long as the image is sharp in the first place, of course. I know Lala will do a lot of sport photography, so let's talk about burst mode. When you push and hold the button, the shutter button in burst mode, the Sony can do 11 frames per second, which is plenty enough, really. The Fujifilm can do 15 frames per second with mechanical shutter and 20 frames per second in electronic shutter mode. And the Canon can also do 15 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and 30 frames per second in electronic shutter mode. If you want to go silent, okay, you can use the electronic shutter mode, but try not to use it when photographing sport because of different reasons. The buffer will be full quickly, so your camera will slow down. You don't want to deal with 100 photos that you just took in 4 seconds and then try to figure out which one is the best between 100 photos that are kind of the same. And because of the rolling shutter of those mid-range camera, you will introduce distortions problem and other problems. So it's best to shoot at 5 to 15 frames per second in mechanical shutter. It's fine, it's plenty enough. It's a lot of photos to deal with already. And do not hold the shutter button for too long, or the buffer will be full and your camera will need 10 seconds to transfer the images. Other noticeable differences between the three cameras: the size of the LCD screen are the same, but the resolution of the Fujifilm LCD screen is 1,840,000 dots. A dot is like a pixel, if you will. Actually, to be precise, a dot is the smaller element that a printer can produce. So I don't know why people call it a dot instead of a pixel in a LCD screen. But okay. The Canon LCD has 1,600,220 dots, and the Sony is way behind with 1,030,000 dots, which is kind of low. It doesn't really matter to me, because if I use the LCD to shoot dog's portrait, for example, at low level, I just make sure that the dog is well framed and I count on my animal tracking to do the job. But it could matter to you. Just know that the image will be a lot better once transferred in your computer compared to the image on the LCD of the Sony. Talking about the LCD screen, Sony and Canon have the same system of flippy screen that you can use in every positions. Very useful if you are filming yourself. Actually, probably better for filmmakers, and you can protect the screen like so when not in use. The Fujifilm though has a more photography-oriented LCD screen. You have basically 3 positions. That's all a street photographer would need, in fact. However, the screen will always be facing the elements. That's why I have a little screen protector on it. Now if you take photos using the electronic viewfinder, the resolution is a bit better. You have 2,360,000 dots with the R7 and the Sony, which is a bit weak in my opinion, but will do the job. And you have a nice 3,690,000 dots with the Fujifilm. Another singularity for Fuji is the Fujifilm receipts. If you shoot in JPEG, those are nice if you are not really into post-processing your images. There are the 14 different JPEG profiles, and you can modify them and make your own if you want. For video, again, to simplify, I would say that all 3 cameras are on the same level. I am happy with all of them. The Sony may be a bit better. This is actually the camera I use the most to film stuff. Except when I film macro, I use the Sony for macro videography because I have the right Sony lens for it that gives me a bit more stabilization. At 60 frames per second outdoor in the Philippines, the first that will overheat is probably the Sony A6700, maybe after 10 minutes, followed by the Fujifilm, and the Canon R7 will last more than 20 minutes, I think. In winter, you can probably double those numbers. Okay, one of my pocket light is dead. To be clear, Lala, you don't need to shoot at 60 frames per second. You shoot at 60 FPS only if you plan to slow the motion in post. You usually want to shoot your videos at 24 to 30 frames per second in most case scenarios. And something that could help actually, and I am not sponsored by Ulanzi or anyone, they make a tiny electric fan that you can squeeze behind the Sony and the R7 and could potentially double the recording time. I never tried it, so if you use it, please let me know in the comment below if it's good or not, and like and subscribe. They all can do time lapses, they all can record in log format. That's the format you want to use if you like to color grade your footage in post, and they all can do bracketing and probably a lot of things that I forget. What else? The menus, the navigation inside the menus. I would say you get used to it eventually, not a big deal. But I think the way Canon present its menu is a bit better and cleaner. With the main page on the top and the sub-pages underneath, even the quick menu is better on the Canon, I think. And they all have the largest batteries, as opposite as the battery that you can find in cheaper cameras. This is the tiny battery used by the R10, R50, R100, even the full frame R8 that cost more than $1,000 has that small battery actually. Maybe a word about autofocus. They all do a good job, but if you shoot mostly wildlife and sport, I would go for one of those two. Not only because the autofocus is slightly more reliable, but also because they have a greater choice of telephoto lenses. That said, there are people using the Fujifilm X-T5 for wildlife, and they get great images taken with the Fujifilm XF150-600 f5.6 to f8, for example. And talking about tracking, the Canon can track human, animals, and cars. The Sony can track human, animals, birds, insects, cars, train, and planes. And the Fujifilm can do mostly what the Sony does, with also motorcycle and bikes. Now, the most important, the lenses. Fujifilm offers a huge range of lenses, and you have access to many excellent third-party lenses. I am thinking Viltrox and Sigma, but also Laowa if you do macro. I have a few of them, the Viltrox 75mm f1.2, the Sigma 10-18 f2.8, the Laowa 65mm f2.8 macro. Amazing stuff, and I have a couple more of XF lenses in Switzerland. Fujifilm being specialized in cropped sensor, all the lenses will be in the smaller size. For the Sony, you have a lot of native lenses for a wide range of prices, and you also have a lot of third-party lenses that you can buy, so also a good variety of choice. Personally, I have only two lenses for my A6700, a native Sony FA90mm f2.8 macro. It's a big one because it's made for full frame, and I have the Sigma 18-50 f2.8, lovely and small, made for cropped sensor. For the Canon R7, the RF mount system is still kind of fresh, but we see more and more native lenses now. Unfortunately, mostly all made for full frame. You can absolutely use them for the R7, but they are maybe on the bigger size and probably a bit more expensive than a lens made for a cropped sensor. This is the kit lens RFS 18-150 sold with my R7, and I think there are only two other RFS lenses on the market. So for now, if you want RF native lenses, you have to buy the ones made for full frame. The good news is that since a few months, Canon has finally opened its doors to third-party lenses for the RF system, but only for the cropped sensors, like the R50, the R100, and the R10, and the R7. So now you can mount the newly released Sigma 18-50 f2.8 on the R7, for example. I have to mention that you can also buy an adapter for older EF lenses, and they will work fine on your R7. I have a video about the EFS 55-250 coupled with my R7. Excellent lens, link in the description below. So if you want a beautiful old-fashioned camera with knobs, wheels and buttons with the highest resolution for photos and video, then go for the Fujifilm. But note that the LCD screen is always aligned with the lens, and that makes it more photography oriented maybe. So it's not really for vloggers and selfie shooters, but there are adapters and screens that you can buy if you want to see yourself. If you want a good all-around very comfortable camera, then you buy the Canon R7. Your lenses will be a bit bigger and maybe a bit more expensive for now, but Viltrox, Samyang and Sigma are catching up quickly with cool, smaller, cheaper lenses. If you want the lightest and more compact one, excellent at videography, but with a weaker EVF and a weaker LCD screen resolution, and a bit less frame per second in photo mode, then you buy the Sony. At the end of the day, if you pair any of those three cameras with a good lens, you will be very happy with excellent photos and videos. I have been very happy. Hopefully I have been also helpful. Bye.